make a statement first. We know that the problem that we all have is that we have an administration that the motto that it goes by is divide and conquer. We have to do the opposite. We have to be 100% inclusive, so whoever has an injustice on them, they have to represent all of humanity. So our message has to be that this is a human injustice. And if we follow that line, we will have everyone joining the cause. But if we stay segmental, we're going to lack the support that's needed for defeating the horrendous issues that are coming out from the administration. So I beg of you, stay united. And if you can do that, I'd like to make a suggestion to you. March 21st is the beginning of spring. Can you mobilize a national protest in every state? 38 days. Can you organize something like that? Because if you do, that would be a very, very loud noise. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from anybody?
Also, thank you for that comment, because I'm all about activism. I don't think this is on, but thank you. I agree.
Yeah, hi, my name is Fadi Altaki. I have a question about the permanent legal residence. As the name defines it, you think that a legal permanent resident is permanently residing in the United States. But we heard earlier something about green card holders being lumped with the visa holders as being potentially subject to denial of entry. And my question is, what are the circumstances that green card holders, other than overstaying a trip abroad, being more than a year, have to worry about as far as coming back and getting denied entry or getting entry?
Okay, great question. So, right, when this executive order was issued, it did specifically say that both immigrants and non-immigrants were banned if they were people from one of these 7 countries. Obviously, again, this executive order was written by, it's speculated to be 3 people, none of which were, I don't think, lawyers, don't have that background. They did not run this by the Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, and because of that, they made a lot of mistakes from a legal perspective. And one of the biggest mistakes they made was that it is clearly not legal nor constitutional to apply this sort of a ban to lawful permanent residents. And I think it was 2 days. So the executive order had said, here, all these individuals from these 7 countries are banned, but we can make a case-by-case exception if we think it's in the national interest. And literally 2 days after they issued this order, somebody, after the rest of the government got to see this for the first time, the lawyers in the government, went to them and said, look, we have a problem here. And so the Department of Homeland Security came out and said that that they would say that they were willing to say that the entry of lawful permanent residents is in the national interest, and so they're letting them in under that exception, which is not the right way to go about it. Literally a day later, then they came out and said, no, we just realized we can't do this at all. The executive order does not apply to lawful permanent residents. So they took one step back and then they stepped back altogether. What was interesting is that Department of Homeland Security, Kelly, was the one who was the first to issue the guidance about the fact that this may not apply to lawful permanent residents. And it's been reported that President Trump's advisor, Steve Bannon, who is, I think, a person who is clearly has a history of being not friendly to immigrants, he didn't want the Department of Homeland Security Secretary to talking about this executive order and what's going to happen, will it be reinstated, will it be rewritten? There's no situation where that executive order is going to apply to ban the reentry or travel of lawful permanent residents, nor would any rewritten version of this attempt to do that because it's just not permitted. Now, like you said, as far as how else can a permanent resident run into issues with as far as travel or otherwise, losing their permanent resident status, like you said, one issue is as a permanent resident, the whole concept of that status is that the U.S. is your place of primary residence. And if you do spend extended periods of time outside the United States, you can be seen to possibly have abandoned that permanent resident status. So if you are absent from the U.S. for a period of between 6 months and 12 months, there's a presumption that you may have abandoned it, but you can try to overcome that presumption. And then if you're gone for 12 months at a time or more, there's an even stronger presumption that you may have abandoned that residence, and it's very hard to overcome. Now that said, as a permanent resident, if you know that there is a legitimate reason why you may need to leave the U.S. for that period of time, you're not intending to abandon your residence or sever your ties with the U.S. If, for example, you're going home to care for a sick family member, you know you might be there for 8 months or 9 months, or someone that I had the example of, if you have a child who is just finishing school and will come back and join you. If you have a legitimate reason for why you're going to be gone for that period, but you notify the government ahead of time by filing a document called a re-entry permit, that can protect you in most situations from being seen as abandoning, even if you're gone for that longer period of time. But you always have to make sure that it's very clear what your ties to the U.S. are. So if you do leave for a significant period of time, even if you have a re-entry permit, you want to make sure that you either have a house here or maybe you have bank accounts here, all the things that you still want to have ties here to show that you really haven't just permanently left the United States. But outside of lengthy absences from the United States, the only other ways that a permanent resident can lose their status is by committing certain crimes. Because unlike a citizen, a lawful permanent resident, if they commit certain egregious crimes, they can be found to be deportable, and they would be deported and forced to leave the United States. So, but outside of significant absences and again criminal issues, there's nothing about this executive order or anything else that should prevent a lawful permanent resident from freely traveling.
Can I ask just a quick question about this? Can the American government revoke citizenship for, for some, not an American, Native American,
Right.
talking about natural rights?
Right, citizenship, no.
You cannot revoke.
Isn't there a stipulation though that if you're naturalized within 5 years and you commit, I forget, some sort of infraction?
It's very, very, once you become a citizen, it's almost impossible to have that revoked.
I have a question. I'm going to read it from the audience. Can green card holders who are eligible to apply for citizenship apply through the new circumstances? They're eligible now to apply. Can they go ahead and apply, or they're going to go certain?
Okay, so before the court issued the temporary restraining order, the answer would have been that USCIS said if you were from one of these 7 countries, that they would accept applications for in-country benefits, but they weren't going to actively process those. Now that was their initial statement. Now what they had said then shortly after that was that applications on what are called the N forms, N400, is the form for citizenship, that they would continue to process those even if the ban was in place, but that other forms like immigrant sponsorship forms or work visa renewal forms or employment authorization document forms, those they were going to accept but not actively process while the ban was in place. But they had come out after and said that they would continue to process naturalization applications. That said, even though they had said that, we were seeing in offices where we had pending cases that they did appear to be being held up. That said, now that the temporary restraining order is in place, the government is actively processing those applications again, or at least they're supposed to, but it is possible that once this is resolved, if this executive order or something like it is
questions for some of my friends who are on temporary protected status, TPS. Do you foresee any, do you think that the government will extend this in the future or not? And whether they have the authority to stop it at any point?
Great question, and I had a similar question during the break. So to answer your question, I mean, temporary status, one, they certainly have the discretion to designate a country for that special status at any time, and they have the ability to revoke that status at any time. That's always been the case. It's a discretionary decision by the U.S. government, who says that if citizens from a particular country who are here in the United States, that it would be unsafe for them to leave and go back to where they came from because of conditions in that country. That is totally a discretionary designation made by the government. They made for Syria and other countries, but they can choose not to extend it for any reason, and they can choose to revoke it for any reason. That said, the history of the TPS program is that once countries have been designated, they tend to stay designated for a pretty significant period of time until it becomes very clear that the situation in those countries is very safe. There are some Central American countries that have had TPS status for 10 years or more, and it still remains intact. So I would say that historically it would be very inconsistent with past practice for the government to revoke temporary protected status for a country after 1 year, especially when the situation in that country is arguably not any better than it was when it was designated. So I guess historically it would be very abnormal for them to do that, and there would be no precedent for them having done that. That said, we are in a different environment now, and none of us really know what to expect. So I wouldn't say it's outside the realm of possibility, but again, it would be historically it would be very counter to the way they've handled this program for other countries.
I have one more question about the doctors who are specializing and they are on J1 or H1B visas and they have to renew it every year. Do you think that they will be denied because they're coming from Syria, because they're Syrian?
One of the issues we were concerned about now, again, what the government keeps pointing to is the fact that, listen, this is just a temporary ban. It's only for 90 days, and then after 90 days, things will move back to normal. But if you read the executive order, the language in there, it says that it's 90 days, but it has the ability to be extended if the government isn't comfortable with the information it's gathering about these countries and whether or not it can determine if they think they can safely and fully vet people coming from those countries. And so the executive order left open the option to extend these bans indefinitely. And so I think that's the fear. Now, if an executive order that kind of a provision was put back in place, that is our concern. And it was our concern when this first came out, is that if you're in the country, there's no direct impact on your status other than you don't want to travel, because if you travel, you're not going to be able to get back. But the indirect impact on your status was that at some point you're going to need to extend your status, or you may need to change your status. And if the government is saying, while this ban is in effect, that they're not going to process your applications to completion, well, that's going to leave a lot of people in limbo. If you file an extension and you file a change of status and you can't start your new job until that change of status is approved, the government is sitting on it for 90 days, maybe more, that can put a lot of individuals in limbo. With regards to extension, there's a little bit of a safeguard in there, and that the law says that if you timely file an extension, so if you file your extension before the expiration date, you remain in status while it's pending for up to 240 days, which is 8 months. So in theory, if someone had filed their extension and the government was slow tracking it because of this ban, they would still remain in status for 8 months. But if it went beyond that 8 months, then potentially there would be an issue. But there's all sorts of, you have EAD renewals, which there's some new provisions in the regulations that have a similar idea in there, that now if you timely file an EAD renewal, that you'll remain, you're allowed to continue working while that's pending. Not sure exactly if that's going to apply to a TPS EAD applicant for renewal, but we'll have to see. specifically for Syrian doctors. So when you come on the J1 status, that as a doctor, you're automatically subject to something called the 2-year home residency requirement, which says that before you, after you complete your training program in J1 status, that before you can change into another status, you have to go back to your country for 2 years, and then at that point, that you can come back to the U.S. and work in any other status. Now, some doctors can apply for a waiver of that that requirement for a variety of reasons, and one basis to apply for a waiver is something called a persecution waiver. It's basically saying that, okay, I would like to comply, but if I went back to my country, I might be harmed or killed because of my religion or some other association with a group. Or, well, you have to. Well, I mean, you have to make a claim. Yeah, it's a difficult analysis, but essentially you have to show that you are part of a particular class that has been subject to violence in your country. And again, the Department of State publishes what are called country condition reports, and they have a lot of data and information about which groups are being targeted for different things. And if you can show you're part of that group, and you have yourself received specific threats, or people like you. Again, Syrian physicians usually have very strong persecution claims because they are a persecuted class in a lot of situations. So, or the other way to get over a waiver is a hardship waiver, saying if I'm on J1, I have a U.S. citizen, spouse, and maybe a child, and it would be a hardship on them to have to follow me back to Syria to spend that 2 years. That's another basis for a waiver option. But where this has created kind of an interesting issue for those physicians is if you obtain one of those waivers, the law still says that you can't do that change of status from J1 to another work visa status like an H1B or a green card from within the U.S. You actually have to go outside the U.S. first to get that visa and then come back. Well, if this travel ban were to stay in place, that doctor who got a waiver, their J1 program is ending, and the only way they can get into a new status is to leave the country. Well, they can't do that because if they left the country, they're not going to be able to come back. So that's just one small example of all of the very far-reaching impacts of this executive order, and again, showing that it just really wasn't very well thought out as to what these implications would be. And so, I guess all I can say to your question is that we would hope that if there's a new, well, we hope the executive order is struck down. If a new one is issued, that it gives us better guidance on how to handle the situation. People who have pending applications in the U.S. who are applying for benefits and not having this hold applied to their applications, and maybe having it simply limited to something like new visa applicants or something like that, not impacting people who are here and trying to finish their careers or their programs of study.
I have one more question, but I think you already answered that. Can refugees who already have a work permit reapply for a new one in case the permit is expired soon? I think that's the same question.
Right, so
visa.
Right, so they can, and right now those renewal applications would be actively processed. Before this suspension, though, there was some question whether they're going to actively process those or not, and we hope whatever happens in the future would still allow those renewal applications to be actively processed.
Just to follow up what you said, one of my friends is a refugee and he applied to renew his EAD and it passed the deadline today, so they're still processing it.
Excellent, great to hear that. Thank you.
I know that you're videotaping this, so is it available on YouTube? So can access this?
What is
I know
that?
you're videotaping the whole event, so is this
We
available?
will put it on the website once we download it. Couple days. Yeah.
Just give us a couple days. Will be available on our website